Welcome back. Well, Malachy Ugwumadu joins us now. He's a legal practitioner. Thank you for coming on this morning.
Thank you for having me, sir.
Well, we're visiting this matter. I mean, we got the views of Lukman Chooks, but the law he read and some basic questions which we put across to him before we even talk about some other matters in the court. He read that, and we all did ask also. From the way he read it, it appears as though, is there just one interpretation to that, irrespective of the gradation of your tint, the tint is the tint, and that's the way he comes across? Is that the way the law is?
Well, first is to observe that the gentleman who spoke from Abuja was actually expressing a very fixated opinion, quite subjective in my humble view, regarding the whole debate. The portion of the law that he read is Section 1, Subsection 1 of the Motor Vehicle Prohibition of Tinted Glass Act, which he appropriately recognized as located in Cap M21 of the laws of the Federation presently. He refused to appreciate that that provision of the law has a proviso, and that was the point you were making. And that is that all of these are prohibited provided such tinting makes the glass obscure or invisible, such that if you want to stretch the argument, as we are bound to do if it becomes a subject of litigation, that becomes a clear question of fact for the court to decide. Namely, is the tinting so thick that it has become obscured or invisible and renders the onlooker renders it impossible for the onlooker to see the content of the vehicle. But I would like to make certain clarifications, if I'm permitted to do that.
Yes,
you see, this whole argument, this whole debate, did not start with this present Inspector General of Police. I listened to a number of people. I've also read a couple of views, expressed in the print media, including those of my good friend, Mr. Frankenberg. And I found that there's a serious gap in what has pushed me to the court and what they are saying today. On the 4th of March, 2011, that's about 2 years ago, the then Minister of Police Affairs, Mr. Humphrey E. Abba, issued a public notice, which he titled in an advertorial widely publicized. I have a copy of it here, which he titled "The Expiration of the Deadline on the Use of of Vehicles with Tinted Glasses" by Humphrey Abba, Honorable Minister of Police Affairs.
That was in 2011.
2011, on the 4th of March, 2011. Indicating that the next day, being the 5th of March 2011, was going to be the deadline for the use of such vehicle. And came down in the penultimate paragraph to say that even permits earlier obtained are hereby revoked. I mean expressly written there. In that same publication, he exempted certain category of politicians, starting from Mr. President, his vice, governors, their deputies, Senate President, his deputy, Speaker, his deputy, and then the House leader, and left it there. On the 9th of March 2011, which was just 5 days later, after a series of contacts that I felt would have brought their attention clearly against the laws, the extant laws that I referred to, I decided to commit my resentment in writing and wrote directly to him, the same letter copied to the Inspector General of Police then, and then to the Attorney General of the Federation, to say that, well, we are in Nigeria, we are not isolated from the rising incidents of crime, including kidnapping and so on and so forth. Although no such thing was stated in that public notice. But we imagine that those were the rationale and the philosophy behind this policy. However, we are in a country, we are in a society regulated by law. We are not in a church or a mosque or a sort of traditional setting where one man just takes position and that becomes it. Please, could you look at section 42 of the ground norm? When I say ground norm, the highest organic law, the supreme law of this country.
It talks about discrimination.
Which talks about discrimination. That section 42 is part of chapter 4, dealing with fundamental human rights of Nigerians. Such that the same way Mr. Chamberlain and Malachy has constitutionally guaranteed rights to life, for instance, to freedom of expression, freedom of religion, movement, and so on and so forth. That same way, under that same chapter, we have a right not to be discriminated against. This was the beginning of my own campaign, and of course, I did not get any response. When I did not get any response, which was naturally expected, I have to approach the Federal High Court for what we call judicial review by way of certiorari. Certiorari is a judicial mechanism by which directives such as this, administrative directives, can be quashed if it is inconsistent with the provisions of the supreme laws of the country or if it offends any other law. The point that I find that my people are missing, and that exposes the poverty of this situation, is that no person is talking about the position of the Constitution in relation to this act of the National Assembly. This is a subsidiary law in relation to the Constitution.
So two things stick out there. First, it should not be discriminatory. If you're going to enforce anything, it has to be to all and sundry.
That's very correct.
Because everyone, according to the law, is equal.
And so that's my case.
And then secondly, the fact that, yes, if they're even going to enforce that law, it has to be taken properly. In the sense that it is not a blanket law.
At all.
There's a proviso which should also be recognized.
That same proviso, or rather, another provision of the law they are quoting, limits the discretion of the police, the Inspector General of Police, assuming without conceding that they are now finding a way around what has wrongly been done. It limits their discretion to just the twin question of security and health. And that's the point Mark was trying to put to him. And therefore, if you have strayed from those two limited, circumscribed conditions within which you can exercise your discretion.
Would you describe it as straying? One would think that the president, the vice president, the speaker, the Senate president, these are people who face a security threat and ought to be protected. You can see the president will not visit anywhere if the place has not been thoroughly vetted and if it's secure, if it's not been declared safe, or if there are security issues around these people. So definitely, the law would definitely fit in perfectly in that particular circumstance, because there is an exception for them, as it were, in the law.
Do they face more security challenges than Malachy, than even Malpa? Let me explain why I don't believe so. These are people who are heavily paid. The same category of people who were exempted are the same people who receive what you call security votes, usually unaccounted for, and running into billions. I was here the other time and I said, Governor Rochas Okorocha, in all fairness to him, disclosed to this country that what his predecessor was receiving before he came on board was 6 billion naira. Mm-hmm. And that when people wonder how he's able to revive free education in Imo State, it was that he dedicated 4 out of that 6 billion to the educational assignment. That is one.
This is assuming that the 6 billion naira, for instance, was only going for his own protection.
I am trying to draw concrete factual analogies to establish to you that you and I are even more exposed to security challenges in this country. And take the ratio. How many of them are assassinated? I'm talking of this category of persons, governor, president, in relation to Nigerians, politicians, ordinary, who are killed on daily basis without any clue. Secondly, if it were just a House majority leader, as one of those exempted, that came for your program today, the whole of your vicinity will be filled with armed policemen. If other security agencies, drawn from all the security agencies of this country, to guard him physically beyond the 6 billion we are talking about. Mark you, if Imo State is receiving 6 billion, my state, Delta State, will be receiving as much as 15 to 20 billion. Security vote, unaccounted for. With that, a governor, a vice president, a senior president can buy armored tank, bulletproof vehicles with which he can physically secure himself, to the detriment of you and I. Secondly, they have policemen, SSS, Navy, Army, guarding them, guarding their mistresses, guarding the way they bury their parents and in their respective villages. You and I who are killed on daily basis, I don't know. You have to remove it. These are the people who have to. But that is the discrimination.
Are we then
under the Constitution?
Are we then saying that? Are we suggesting that these people go about? I mean, since the law doesn't recognize that the president is different from you and I.
That's true.
Are you suggesting then that the president goes about without any security protection?
In short, right in court.
Is that what you're
right
suggesting?
In court, that issue came up. But it's sub judice. I will not go into detail. Mm-hmm. And I had, if you like, the courage to even remind the trial judge that, my lord, would you even appreciate that in the desperation of the executive and the legislature to protect themselves to the detriment of every other person, no single judge, not even the Chief Justice of Nigeria, look at it, that's what I'm putting, was mentioned in that exemption. No single judge. Yet, these are people, in your own words, whose duty, whose responsibility entails presiding, superintending over very sensitive cases that could end them any form of violence. Mm-hmm. So you could see how skewed.
So you do appreciate that there are certain jobs that could earn you some form of violence.
I was using that example to demobilize your own argument. To say, even if we need...
Well, I've converted it back to empower my own argument. And I'm asking again, that you do appreciate that there are certain jobs that do expose people to some amount of violence. Because not everybody will agree with them. And sometimes the jobs could be dangerous.
Well, if I concede to the extent of the judiciary, I will not concede as it affects the other category of persons who are exempted.
So if this
on the contrary, my view about this is that it is the Nigerian people. Don't forget, we don't just jump up and begin to run amok with some of these ideas. Some of these drastic steps which we have taken at the risk of our lives and energy and resources has to do with the build-up to that situation. I was the National General Secretary of Committee for Defense of Human Rights. Between the year 96 to 99, 2006 to 2009, you had about 9 journalists who were assassinated in this country. 9. No trace. They are out there on record. No person was convicted for those assassinations. I'm talking of just a single professional body. Leave out the legal profession, leave out any other profession, leave out the politicians. These are ordinary Nigerians. And if we have found a situation in which the level of insecurity in the country, no thanks to the incapacity of the present government to deal with them, is beginning to consume members of the society, you don't go fortifying those who already have both financial and security so to the detriment of those of us who are killed on daily basis.
So what are you saying here? We should have a blanket law with no exemption?
in short, that is what is before the court. We are saying that what they have done is in total violation of the Constitution. So and the law, Suleiman, thank you for this. The law is that if any other law, and this is such any other law, Motor Vehicle Prohibition of Tinted Glass Act, runs foul of the express provision of the Constitution, I've mentioned Section 42, which prohibits discrimination. That other law, this one, will fall flat to the extent of that inconsistency. So I listened to the previous speaker, and I also sympathize with him because I watched the difficulty he had in trying to push some of the cases that he was trying to make.
Well, what about the fear of people going to get permits? And he says it's basically on account of security. If you go and you're a bad Nigerian, maybe a kidnapper, couldn't you as well approach the police and get your own permit?
No, first of all, I would think that the police organization need to reconcile their position with what was already existing. Because as I speak with you, there are two directives on this prohibition. The one is the one that is still in 2011 by the former Minister of Police Affairs,